Late spring in Pennsylvania can be a bit unpredictable, and this April was no exception. It had been unusually rainy and warm, creating a stark contrast to the previous year when we were buried under a snowstorm that dumped nearly 6 inches on the area. Normally, I'd be out mowing the lawn by mid-April, but this year, the grass was green and lush, waiting for its first trim. And honestly, I was grateful for the change. After a grueling tax season, it felt refreshing to finally step outside into the sunshine. My house has a unique feature: the backyard slopes steeply downward, leading to a small stream and a dense patch of woods. When the house was built, they had to backfill the front to level it with the road, resulting in a steep incline halfway up the side of the house. This design allowed the basement to be completely enclosed at the front while opening up to the back, which made it perfect for installing a double-leaf service door. Instead of cluttering up the garage, I could easily roll my lawnmower and gardening supplies in and out through that door. It's one of my favorite aspects of the house. After finishing the mowing and putting everything away, I felt a sneeze coming on. I'm allergic to grass, and I was ready for a hot shower. I had almost reached the top step when I heard my wife's voice. I noticed her friend's car in the driveway earlier, so I wasn't surprised to hear their chatter. But then I caught snippets of their conversation, and my hand froze as I reached for the doorknob. Let me backtrack a bit and introduce myself properly. My name is Robert Crane, but I prefer to be called Bob. In school, they used to call me Hogan, after the actor Robert Crane from Hogan's Heroes. I never minded it, even though the show aired before I was born, and it hardly counts as a pop culture reference anymore. I graduated from the University of Pennsylvania with a degree in accounting, and I was still being called Hogan even after graduation. I earned my CPA degree in the shortest time allowed and now work as a team leader at a large accounting firm in Philadelphia. It's not the most exhilarating job, but it pays well, and I've had the chance to see the inner workings of numerous companies. I have a knack for forensic analytics, piecing together financial trails to investigate things like fraud and money laundering. I'm considered something of an expert in my field and was even asked to consult with the FBI on a couple of cases. Now, let's talk about my wife, Kelly. She majored in political science and business, with aspirations of pursuing a law degree. We met during our freshman year when I was sitting in a classroom, nervous and waiting for the first day of classes. That's when she walked in. Kelly was tall and slender, like a ballerina, with long, strawberry blonde hair that cascaded over her shoulders. She wore a sundress that highlighted her amazing legs, and the combination of her innocence and sensuality was simply intoxicating. I was smitten, but, unfortunately, she wasn't seated next to me, and she wasn't assigned to my group project. It took me a full month to work up the courage to approach her. I remember making a clumsy joke, and to my surprise, she erupted into laughter, not just a giggle but a full, hearty laugh that lit up the room. From there, our conversation flowed effortlessly, and I asked her out for coffee after class. "I've been waiting for that question for 4 weeks," she replied with a smile. The next 2 years of college felt like a dream. We were practically inseparable, much to the chagrin of our parents. They were initially apprehensive about us moving in together during our senior year, but they soon realized how devoted we were to one another. I honestly couldn't imagine how things could get better, but they did. After I graduated, I landed a job at one of the big accounting firms in Philadelphia, earning a ridiculous salary for a 22-year-old. Kelly got accepted into the law school at the University of Pennsylvania, and we continued living in our student apartment. My company offered to pay for my MBA, so I started taking classes, riding SEPTA to work every day. That way, I didn't need a car, which helped cut down costs. 3 years later, when Kelly graduated, I proposed during a birthday dinner at Morton's Steakhouse in Rittenhouse Square. 6 months later, we tied the knot. Kelly landed a position as a deputy district attorney in the Bucks County District Attorney's Office, just north of Philadelphia. We were excited about the future and the opportunities that lay ahead. Little did I know that the seemingly perfect life we were building together was about to face some unexpected challenges. As I stood outside, listening to Kelly's voice mix with her friend's laughter, I felt a nagging sense of unease. Something was off, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. I took a deep breath and opened the door, determined to find out what was really going on. We made the decision to buy a house in the county seat, a quaint town that boasted a charming courthouse and was conveniently located at the end of the regional rail line. This meant I could easily take the train to work each day, which was a welcome relief compared to the grueling 80-minute drive one way. After all, it was a far better option than navigating the notorious Skull Expressway or I-95. Kelly and her mother did a fantastic job scouting out homes. They found a wonderful starter house that had 3 bedrooms. One of the rooms was set up as an office, with 2 desks side by side, perfect for me, since I sometimes worked from home, and Kelly needed her own space for her legal work. The second bedroom was designated as a guest room, and of course, the last room would be our master bedroom. The house was also conveniently close to her parents' place, which Kelly assured me was a built-in nanny option once we started having kids. As an only child, I always dreamed of having siblings, and Kelly and I had talked about starting a family since our freshman year. We agreed to hold off on kids until she was firmly settled in her career, but now we had reached a pivotal moment. Just 2 nights ago, we had made the momentous decision to stop Kelly's birth control and start trying for a baby. I was happier than ever. Then, just as I was basking in that joy, I overheard something that made my hand linger on the doorknob. "I think it's time for me to get pregnant," Kelly announced excitedly. Her friend Olivia Watkins squealed with delight, and the 2 women erupted into high-pitched giggles, sounding like whales stranded on the Jersey shore. I couldn't help but smile at their excitement, which mirrored my own anticipation of becoming a father. Just as I reached for a pen to jot down my thoughts, a question floated into the air that wiped the grin off my face and drained the happiness right out of me. "That's wonderful, Kelly," Olivia said, her voice laced with curiosity, "but what are you going to do about Paul?" The air thickened as Kelly quickly calmed her friend down. "Hogan is outside mowing the lawn," she explained, but I could sense the pause that followed. It was as if she was searching for the right words, waiting for me to show up and chime in. Then she spoke again, and I felt my heart sink. "I already told Paul that I'm ending the affair. He didn't mind. After Grossman steps down as the caterer, Paul thinks he has a real chance. Getting caught having an affair with a married employee would be very unpleasant. It's that simple." Those 3 sentences shattered my world. Paul Evans was Kelly's boss at the DA's office, a widower in his 40s whose wife had passed away from breast cancer, leaving him as the single father to their daughter, Barbara. He was a true political animal, and Kelly often shared stories of his machinations within the party as he aimed for higher office. It was suddenly clear how my wife had gained access to all that secret information. "Is that really true?" Olivia asked, her voice dripping with skepticism. "Just like that, you're going to give it up? You've been hot and heavy for 6 months, and now you're just walking away?" The teasing doubt in her tone sent a wave of fury through me. I'd known Olivia from Penn State and had thought we were friends, even if she was Kelly's best friend now. Clearly, I was mistaken. "Stop. Stop it," Kelly protested, giggling as she tried to brush off the tension. "You're being ridiculous. Paul is a great lover, but it was just a fun fling. I love Hogan. Paul just used me for his own pleasure. There was no love, only rough sex and power play. Now that Hogan and I are having a baby, I don't want to take any risks. I love Hogan, and I'll be a good and faithful mother." I couldn't help but roll my eyes at the clichés spilling from her lips. All I needed for a truly miserable day was to come home and find an unfamiliar car in my driveway, only to discover them tangled up in my bed. I wanted to burst into the room and scream, to tear everything apart, but I was frozen. My body was paralyzed, stunned into silence by the revelation. My heart was racing, pounding in my ears. "So, cold turkey?" Olivia asked again, but this time Kelly giggled. "Well, not exactly cold turkey," she admitted. "Next week, I have a conference in Pittsburgh with Paul. We're having a farewell party there. I'll miss the sex, but Hogan and the baby are my top priorities now." I couldn't take it anymore, but I didn't know what to do. I loved Kelly, but this was eating me alive. My background in business education started to kick in. I realized I needed to step back and strategize. I had to think clearly and devise a plan. As I stood there, grappling with my emotions, I knew that whatever I decided next would change everything. I had to regain control of my life and my future. I stomped up the steps, my frustration boiling over as I climbed each one. When I finally reached the top, I swung open the door and walked into the kitchen. Kelly and Olivia were sitting there, cups of tea steaming in front of them. I noticed a flicker of guilt cross Kelly's face, and it sent a pang through my chest. "Honey, are you okay?" she asked, her brow furrowed with concern. I suddenly realized my cheeks were streaked with tears, and I quickly wiped them away. "Just allergies," I muttered, trying to sound nonchalant. "It's going to be a rough spring." "Well, go upstairs and take a shower," Kelly suggested gently. "Just toss your clothes near the bathroom, and I'll wash them right away so they don't mess up your closet. Last week, I picked up a new pack of Claritin D for you, it's in the medicine cabinet." "Thanks," I replied, managing a weak smile before heading toward the stairs. I needed time alone to think. The next morning was Monday, and I used the excuse of an early meeting to slip out of the house before Kelly even got out of bed. The night before, I had claimed my allergies were flaring up, which gave me the perfect reason to head to bed early. But really, my emotions were all over the place, and I needed some distance. As I sat in my car, the weight of the past few days pressed heavily on me. I couldn't shake the thoughts swirling in my mind. On one hand, my wife had betrayed me, but it was all purely physical, an affair that seemed to have ended so she could return to me and raise our child. Some would argue I should just accept her back and be grateful that she wanted to rebuild our marriage, to be a good wife and mother. But another voice in my head was relentless, whispering doubts and fears. If she cheated once, what would stop her from doing it again in 10 years? When our kids were in school, would she find herself drawn to another affair? The prospect of a future filled with betrayal loomed over me like a dark cloud. I pictured the potential fallout. Kelly would likely get the kids, and I'd be left with a hefty child support bill. As an accountant and business analyst, I couldn't help but analyze the situation through the lens of risk and reward. My trust in Kelly had been shattered, and it seemed like every justification she had given me, the just sex excuse, missed the crux of the issue. The core problem was a complete lack of respect for me as her partner. If she truly respected me, she would have talked to me about her feelings instead of sneaking around. Sure, I could never fully accept the idea of her sleeping with Paul, but at least if she had been honest, there would have been some dignity in the conversation. Instead, her actions felt like a slap in the face, and I was left feeling humiliated and betrayed. I tried to focus on work, but part of my mind was consumed with thoughts of what I should do. I had no concrete evidence to confront her directly, all I had was the overheard conversation. For the past 6 months, nothing had seemed amiss. Confronting her without proof felt like a gamble with high stakes and little chance of a positive outcome. Kelly would deny it, and Paul Evans would back her up. Going through the courts felt like financial suicide, especially with how intertwined our lives had become in this small town where everyone knew each other. The last thing I wanted was to be seen as the bitter ex-husband. The thought of leaving and starting fresh somewhere else was tempting, but it felt like the house was an anchor weighing me down. Kelly couldn't afford the mortgage on her salary alone, and we had almost no equity. Selling it would be a desperate move to avoid foreclosure, and in today's market, that seemed unlikely. It would ruin both of our credit scores, and as a CPA, having a bad credit history could jeopardize my career. Who would trust me with other people's money if I couldn't manage my own finances? I needed solid proof before making any decisions. I was desperate for evidence that would validate my feelings and give me the strength to confront her. But after 3 days of searching, I still found nothing. Her personal laptop was clean, with no secret email accounts lurking in the shadows. I didn't find any sexy lingerie hidden away, no receipts for places she shouldn't have been. It was like trying to find a needle in a haystack. Then, just when I thought I was running out of options, Kelly called me at work. "We're invited to a political announcement party at Paul Evans's house on Friday night," she said cheerfully. The invitation hit me like a punch to the gut. How could she not see the irony? The man who had apparently caused so much turmoil in our lives was now the center of her social calendar. My mind raced as I tried to process what that night could mean. Would I confront her there? Would I be able to keep my composure in front of everyone? As the clock ticked down to Friday, I knew that the party could be my chance to uncover the truth or at least confront the facade she had built around our lives. I felt a mix of dread and anticipation as I prepared for what lay ahead. The stakes were high, and the outcome would determine the course of our future together, if there was even a future left to salvage. I had assumed this would be the moment Paul Evans made his big announcement, his candidacy for a seat in the U.S. Senate. I had envisioned a grand reveal, but despite my suspicions, I still lacked concrete proof. Damn it. We arrived just in time for the event, and I couldn't help but notice the grandeur of Evans' mansion near Washington Crossing. The property boasted a sprawling backyard with a small horse farm, which felt like the perfect backdrop for a political soiree. A large tent had been erected to accommodate the guests, and as we walked in, there he was, Paul Evans, standing at the head of the reception line, looking every bit the king he believed himself to be. As a widower, he didn't have a wife to play the role of hostess, but he had clearly enlisted his stunning 21-year-old daughter for the task. She stood by his side, greeting guests with the poise of someone born for the spotlight. When it was our turn, Evans' face lit up with a broad smile as he turned to Kelly. "Kelly, you did it. How wonderful," he exclaimed, leaning in to kiss my wife chastely on the cheek. Then, he turned to me, his smile never faltering. "Robert, good to see you again. I'd be lost without your wife, but I understand I'll soon have to give her up when you start expanding your family," he joked, chuckling at his own quip. "Just let me take her when you're done with her, and there won't be any hard feelings." Laughter erupted around us, and even Kelly blushed a little. My gut twisted with rage as I realized his implication, an unmistakable hint that he believed I was somehow oblivious to his intentions. "Who knows what the future will bring?" I replied in a flat, neutral tone. My words weren't hostile, but they were certainly far from friendly. I delivered the audit results with the same clinical detachment, and Evans blushed slightly at my response. Kelly elbowed me, muttering something about manners. Evans smoothly turned to the next guest in line, leaving us alone with his daughter. I couldn't help but notice how attractive Kelly was, but Barbara Evans was a vision that made even my inner rage fade momentarily. With her auburn hair and brilliant smile, she reminded me of a young Marilyn Monroe. While Kelly had the grace of a ballerina, Barbara looked like she belonged on a swimsuit calendar, right next to Kate Upton. She was the kind of woman who drew attention without even trying. Her hair, skin, and figure were the stuff of photographers' dreams, the kind of beauty that often needed Photoshop to achieve. Paul Evans seemed to have crafted the perfect political family, charming, photogenic, and poised to win hearts on the campaign trail. With a saintly late wife and a smart, stunning daughter, any opponent who dared to attack them would likely commit political suicide. Barbara was everything, a former gymnast, a cheerleader for Penn State, and now planning to try out for the Eagles cheerleading squad since she had just turned 21. "Robert," Barbara exclaimed, her voice filled with excitement as she hugged me tightly. This wasn't just a polite hug at a party, it felt like a full-body compression, with parts of her pressed against me in a way that was more than a little pleasant. "You look great. No wonder Kelly hides you away. You never come to any of our parties. You shouldn't work so hard, it's bad for your health. She rattled it all off in a single breath, and I was left in a state of shock, momentarily disarmed. I managed to compliment her on her appearance and was about to leave when two thoughts struck me. First, Barbara hadn't even acknowledged Kelly. Second, what kind of parties was she talking about? But Kelly didn't give me a chance to inquire further. She rushed in with her own greeting for Barbara. Before I knew it, we had to step aside for the next guests in line. As Kelly and I moved to find a quieter spot, my mind raced. What exactly did Barbara know? After pouring my wife a drink, I leaned in closer. What parties was Barbara talking about? Kelly just smiled, dismissing my concerns with a casual snort. Oh, she was just teasing. Sometimes Paul holds team meetings and strategy sessions here. He says he thinks better with a drink in his hand, and who knows who might be in the next booth. I swallowed hard, my thoughts spiraling. She was home several times when we met here? Yeah, Kelly replied, her tone light. Don't tell anyone, but Paul allowed her to drink at home before she turned 21. My mind raced with this new information. This bastard had been entertaining my wife under the guise of team meetings right here in his home. The implications made my blood boil. As I glanced around the lavish venue, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, and I realized I was standing at the crossroads of betrayal and political ambition. And I couldn't shake the feeling that I was in the eye of a storm I couldn't control. As the evening unfolded, the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. Kelly had been working late at the office more frequently, and there were whispers about her commitment to her boss, Paul Evans. There were even rumors that she was the last to leave after meetings or that she had slipped out first only to return when everyone else had gone home. This created a veil of secrecy, keeping the legal minds at bay, curious about her late-night cleanup sessions with Paul. With his wife gone and their daughter away at college, he didn't need to retreat to some secluded hotel room. There would be no paper trail of their encounters. Does Barbara attend your team meetings? I asked Kelly one evening, genuinely curious. She waved my question away. No, she's been home. Her classes got canceled a few times this week, Kelly said, a playful smile tugging at her lips. She's just teasing her dad about partying while he's at work. Then, pulling my hand, she added, come on, honey, buy your young wife a drink. For the next hour, Kelly was glued to my side. We mingled with a few of her coworkers, and as the topic shifted to our plans to have a baby, I felt a flush of embarrassment wash over me. It seemed everyone knew our intentions, and their genuine happiness for us only heightened my discomfort. About an hour later, Paul Evans took center stage. His daughter stood proudly beside him, beaming. He began by thanking everyone for their presence before launching into the announcement of his new campaign. The news was expected, yet the excitement in the room was palpable. I spotted a local newspaper publisher and one of his reporters nearby, scribbling notes. There would definitely be a feature in the morning's paper. I won't bore you with the mundane details of the party. It would have been a pleasant gathering if my heart hadn't felt shattered and my mind hadn't been racing with a million thoughts on how to prove my suspicions. An hour and a half after Paul's grand announcement, Margaret Williamson, the first assistant district attorney, entered the scene. Paul wants to meet with his staff, she said, her voice commanding attention. While Paul was an elected official, Margaret was the backbone of the office, an experienced manager who kept things running smoothly. Prosecutors might come and go every 4 years, but Margaret was a constant presence. Her reputation for honesty and integrity earned her respect in the legal community, and she was the main reason Kelly had taken the job. I admired Margaret. She had been married for over 30 years to an electrician who had supported her through college, and now he owned a successful electrical contracting company. They were a shining example of what a loving partnership could be. Sorry for stealing your wife, Hogan, Margaret teased lightly as Paul gestured for her to follow him. He wants to discuss the organization of the office once he stops campaigning. After they left, I drifted away from the small gathering of spouses still lingering at the meeting and made my way to the far side of the large pool, across from the patio where the party was in full swing. I found a wicker swing chair, hanging gently from chains in the shadows, perfect for a moment of solitude to gather my thoughts. I hadn't even settled in for 5 minutes when a familiar voice broke through the silence. "So this is where you're hiding," Barbara remarked, sliding gracefully into the swing beside me. She positioned herself to face me directly, her presence commanding attention. Without uttering a word, she captivated my gaze. The little black dress she wore hugged her tan hips, hinting at her curves without revealing too much. Seductive yet innocent, it painted a picture that left a lingering impression in my mind. "You look like someone carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders," she said, her voice laced with concern. I didn't want to discuss my troubles with the daughter of my wife's lover, no matter how attractive she was. "We're swamped at the office," I replied, hoping to steer the conversation away. "There are a lot of audits going on." "Is it true?" Barbara asked, her curiosity piqued. "I heard you just finished your last accounting course at university." Her interest caught me off guard. "Yeah, that's right," I replied, trying to keep my tone neutral, but her gaze was intense. "I've been working hard to keep up." "Impressive," she said, nodding. "You've got a lot on your plate. I can only imagine how challenging it is balancing everything." I shrugged, feeling a mix of irritation and fascination. "It's not easy, but I'm managing." Barbara leaned closer, her demeanor shifting slightly as if she were genuinely invested in our conversation. "If you ever need to talk, I'm here." "I get it, life can throw some serious curveballs." I couldn't help but appreciate her sincerity, but I was also wary of where this conversation might lead. "Thanks, but I think I need to figure this out on my own for now." She gave me a knowing smile. "That's fair. Just remember, you're not alone in this." As we exchanged a few more words, I felt the tension around us shift. In the midst of my inner turmoil, there was something strangely comforting about this unexpected connection. But just as quickly, I reminded myself of the fragile state of my marriage and the stakes involved. I needed to stay focused, to keep my head clear, and to navigate these turbulent waters carefully. We taught several classes on the use of forensic accounting and law enforcement, and I found the whole process incredibly exciting, even amidst my grief. When Barbara expressed her enthusiasm, I couldn't help but respond incredulously, "Well, it's not exactly sexy or anything, but it really is like being a detective. You have to gather all the right pieces of information from a mountain of facts and put them together to form a clear picture. And when some people try to hide that information, it makes it even more challenging." I could sense that most people didn't see it that way, but I knew the truth. Barbara then launched into a detailed account of what she'd learned in class and why she enjoyed it so much. I was genuinely impressed. I'd had interns at firms who couldn't articulate their thoughts as well on this subject. Focusing on her words helped me push aside her appearance and, more importantly, the anger that was simmering just beneath the surface. I felt myself slipping into the role of mentor, which allowed me to set my emotional turmoil aside for a moment. "You really love the course, don't you?" I remarked, trying to encourage her. "It looks like you've mastered the topic quite well." Barbara blushed at my praise, and for a fleeting moment, the pin-up girl image faded, revealing a sweet girl who was genuinely touched by my compliment. "I've been thinking about joining the FBI after I finish school," she said, her eyes sparkling with ambition. "But my dad wants me to either become a prosecutor or work at one of his friend's law firms. I don't think that's what I want to do, though." "You should follow your own dreams, not your father's," I advised, trying to be supportive. I wasn't against thwarting that jerk's plans. I had worked a bit with the FBI when my audits revealed criminal activity, and I felt that a career there might be a good fit for Barbara. Before she could respond, Kelly stepped out of the shadows. "There you are. I was wondering where you disappeared to. You didn't do anything scandalous, did you?" she teased. Barbara turned to face my wife, her face glowing with excitement. We were just talking about Bob's work. I wanted to get his expert opinion on some things we discussed in class. Well, Hogan is just that good, Kelly said proudly. I watched her face light up as she recounted a particular audit I had conducted where an employee embezzled money using his boss's login credentials. Bob realized that some of the transfers took place while the guy was on a business trip, but the logins were made from the corporate office. Most people would have stopped there, thinking they had identified the culprit, but Bob kept digging. He could have secured a conviction against that employee on his first day out of law school. He left the prosecutors with nothing to do in that case. As she praised me, confusion washed over me. How could she feel so proud of me and still be involved in a 6-month affair with her damn boss? A hint of that confusion must have crossed my face because Kelly looked at me with concern. "What's wrong, dear?" "Nothing," I replied, forcing a smile. "Just thinking about some work stuff." "Well, stop it. It's a party," Kelly admonished playfully, barely catching her breath before continuing. "You'll never guess what opportunity just came my way. Paul and Margaret want me to do some admin work while Margaret is going on maternity leave. This way, when I leave, there won't be any loose ends. I'll be working directly for Margaret." My heart skipped a beat at the thought of Kelly being away from that bastard Paul, but my hopes were dashed a second later. "I'll have to travel sometimes, though," she added quickly. "I'll be delivering important papers to Paul during the campaign. I won't be involved in his campaign, but I'll get to see some behind-the-scenes action. It'll be so much fun." I felt my heart shatter again. I could easily imagine her being unfaithful again on the campaign trail. And if she ended up pregnant, who's to say the child would be mine? Paul was about my size and color. Without a DNA test, proving paternity would be nearly impossible. My rage began to rise, but I suppressed it. Now was not the time. Barbara started discussing her new position with Kelly, and they quickly became engrossed in conversation, leaving me feeling forgotten. I seized the opportunity to pull myself together, reminding myself that I had to stay composed for the rest of the night. I couldn't let the turmoil swirling inside me spill over, not when there was so much at stake. I had to keep my wits about me, especially with the layers of deception closing in. I knew I had to start planning. I needed a way to counteract Paul's political influence, but if I'm being honest, I had no clue how to even begin. Just 2 days later, the answer walked right into my office. "Your 4 o'clock meeting is already here," my assistant called out from the open door. I glanced at my Outlook calendar, perplexed. I didn't see anything scheduled. Before I could respond, she stepped inside, and my jaw nearly dropped. "Hey, Hogan." Barbara Evans greeted me with a bright smile. Her long auburn hair cascaded over her shoulders, framing her face beautifully. She wore a light sundress that accentuated her stunning legs and strappy sandals that hugged her calves all the way up to her knees. While her dress modestly covered her breasts, the fabric clung just enough to give a hint of allure. I found myself momentarily speechless as she entered the room. "I hope you don't mind," Barbara began, closing the office door behind her. I informed Mary that we had a meeting to discuss my career in Kelly's employment under my father. I stood up politely as she entered, trying to regain my composure. "Glad to see you. I was just working on some reports," I said, gesturing for her to take a seat at the table. Once she settled in, I joined her. "So, what did you want to talk about?" Barbara's expression shifted dramatically. The bright smile faded, replaced by a look of concern. "I think you know Bob," she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. "I saw it in your face when you spoke to my father." I was taken aback by the sudden change in mood. "I'm really sorry he's causing trouble," I managed to say, but this wasn't what I had expected. Barbara didn't mince words. "My father is having an affair with your wife," she stated bluntly. I leaned back in my chair, stunned by her directness. "Did you find out recently?" she asked, her tone softer now. I nodded, still processing the weight of her words. I'm really sorry. How? When did you find out? Barbara took a deep breath. About 3 months ago, she admitted. I don't know when it started, but I found out in February. One Friday, I came home early, and they were together in our jacuzzi. I took photos and even recorded them running naked into the house. There was a full foot of snow on the ground. My shock was palpable. Did you take pictures of your father in that situation? I asked, incredulous. Could I get copies? Barbara reached into her bag and pulled out a large envelope. Here are the photographs from that day and several others, she said. Dad installed a security system in the house, the entire exterior is covered, and several interior rooms have cameras. Stunned by this revelation, it dawned on me that Paul's daughter had just provided everything I needed to dissolve her father's marriage. Why are you doing this? I asked, trying to understand her motives. Barbara's sad expression morphed into anger. Because I hate him more than you ever could, she spat. I stayed silent, allowing her to vent her feelings. Dad met Mom when she was a college student. He was an aspiring lawyer assigned to the sex crimes unit in Philadelphia, Barbara explained. Mom came over from Ireland to study. Her family was well off, but they died in the Londonderry bombing. She came here to escape the turmoil. Her voice softened as she recounted the past. Mom was involved with some guy who ended up putting her in intensive care with his violence. She paused for a moment, placing a thick book adorned with greenery and lace on my table. I found her diary after she passed away. She had a penchant for being submissive in relationships, enjoying the dominance of a strong partner. This guy took it too far, landing her in the hospital. Barbara continued, her eyes narrowing with determination. My father was assigned to her case. They met, and after he went to jail, a year later, they got married. Dad was always ambitious, he snagged a smart, beautiful woman with an exotic accent, while Mom found a protector. I listened intently as she spoke, realizing this wasn't just about her father's affair, it was a deep-seated pain that had been festering for years. I came along a few years later, she continued, and Dad wanted me to pursue gymnastics, thinking an Olympic-bound daughter would boost his political career. Do you know how most gymnasts' careers end? I shook my head, genuinely curious. I had never thought about it. Barbara smiled wryly. They call it the 3 Bs, boobs, butts, and boys, she sighed. I got the first one. I was pushed into cheerleading, supposed to be the all-American girl. As she spoke, I could see the conflict in her eyes, the desire to break free from her father's control clashing with the loyalty she still felt towards her mother's memory. This was more than just a meeting about careers, this was about legacy, power, and a chance to reclaim her identity. I felt a spark of hope flicker inside me. If Barbara was willing to stand up against her father, maybe there was a way for me to confront Paul and take control of my own life. The pieces of the puzzle were starting to fall into place, and I knew I needed to act swiftly before the situation spiraled even further out of control. At 16, I didn't mind the spotlight, I loved performing. But as the years passed, the thrill began to fade, and I realized I was just a pawn in my father's relentless quest for success. My mother, Barbara, had been aware of my father's true nature almost from the beginning. He had affairs from the get-go, and despite her pleas for him to stop, she was too weak to take decisive action. Divorce was out of the question for her, a devout Catholic who clung to her faith even when it broke her spirit. Barbara paused, gathering her thoughts, her expression revealing a hint of vulnerability. Sometimes I wonder if her poor response to cancer treatment was a subconscious desire to escape or if she was actively sabotaging herself. Anyway, I was with her in the hospital when she passed. Her voice turned bitter. The official story was that my father went to court and orchestrated a murder case, forcing the doctor to change the time of death. In reality, he celebrated her death by having sex with his assistant in her apartment, presenting my mother as nothing more than a trophy. The press devoured the story of how he met her. Heroic prosecutor saves battered woman, but that bastard beat her more than once, and I witnessed it. Why are you telling me all this? I asked, the weight of her words pressing down on me. I felt compelled to know. Because you deserve to know the truth about Hogan. My father isn't a good man. After my mother died, he hid his affairs until I left for college. Then he began organizing meetings in our home, not just for work, but also for charity groups he's involved with. I know for sure he's sleeping with 2 women from these groups. One of them genuinely believes it's true love and is planning to leave her husband. The thought churned in my stomach. Is that what Kelly is thinking of doing? I asked, trying to wrap my head around the implications of her words. Barbara shook her head. No, she thinks it's just fun. They say power is the greatest aphrodisiac, and Kelly seems to be living proof of that. I overheard her talking to my dad about some senator they were meeting with. What do you want? I inquired, my curiosity piqued. To her credit, Barbara met my gaze with unwavering determination. I want you to get out of your marriage with this traitor. I want my father's career to be ruined to the point where he could never be elected dog catcher in a town full of cats. I believe that together, we can make them pay. I hesitated. Wouldn't it be more difficult for you to finish school if we get involved in this? She tossed her auburn hair over her shoulder. No, my mother left me her inheritance as a trust fund. I haven't touched it, but if it came down to it, I could pay for the rest of my MBA tuition and still have a nice cushion left over. If your mother had so much money, why didn't she take you and leave? She could have gone to Ireland, where your father couldn't reach her, I suggested. Barbara winced at the mention of Ireland. She was raised Irish Catholic. Divorce was never an option, no matter what. My mother held on to her faith until the very end, and that's the only thing that makes me think her death was unintentional. They also consider suicide to be an unforgivable sin. As I listened to her, I could see nothing but truth in Barbara's eyes. She wanted to ruin her father's career, and the fact that I had this information didn't bode well for his ambitions. I didn't think it was some kind of trap. If Kelly and Paul wanted to destroy me, they could do it openly in court. This meant the plan was only for those who were desperate, like me. A plan began to form in my head, and I realized I needed Barbara's help with a few things. If nothing else, it would show me how dedicated she was to taking her father down. Okay, I'm in, I finally agreed. But I don't want to destroy him by publishing these pictures, or even naming him in the divorce. Barbara looked at me in surprise. Why not? Her face flushed with passion as she prepared to launch into a speech. I raised my hand to stop her. I didn't say we wouldn't destroy him. But I don't want to deal with the bad press of a cheating husband and a political scandal. Instead, I want to take away what he strived for all his life, his power and influence. I can have a quiet divorce that no one will worry about. Barbara's shock morphed into a sly smile. What do you want from me? She asked. I need you to get me his financial documents, personal and for his campaign. They took down Capone thanks to tax evasion. Having met your father, I have no doubt I can find something, and if not, I let a smile creep across my lips, I can do one more thing. For the next 3 days, Barbara and I were busy. She installed a keystroke recorder on her father's personal laptop and home computer. We were determined to gather enough evidence to expose him for who he truly was, and I was ready to put my plan into action. She had also taken a complete backup of Paul Evans' computer hard drive, a strategic move that showed her resourcefulness. We set up their security system to upload records to a cloud storage I had physically confirmed was located abroad. For my part, I didn't bother bugging Kelly's phone. With Barbara's evidence in hand, I didn't need to. Instead, I activated a GPS tracker designed for parents keeping tabs on their kids. It relied on cell towers to determine locations, which was helpful. Unless I sent a command to activate the GPS, it remained dormant. I just wanted to make sure she didn't find me at home while I was tied up with work. To buy myself some time, I faked a groin injury the day after Barbara's first visit. It provided a convenient excuse to avoid intimacy with Kelly after learning about her involvement with Paul. I didn't want to take any more risks than I had already unwittingly taken, and honestly, I couldn't imagine being with her without my anger exploding. I even made an appointment with my doctor to get tested for sexually transmitted diseases. Initially, everything came back negative, but I knew that some infections, like HIV, could take months to show up in tests. Kelly was off to a conference in Pittsburgh for her last rendezvous with Paul, and honestly, I couldn't blame her for being excited about the trip. She had no idea that my heart was a battlefield, torn between lingering love and betrayal. I realized I would never be able to trust her again, but that didn't erase my feelings. The thought of being intimate with her after everything I had discovered made me feel sick. It was Thursday morning, and Kelly stood by the front door, her bag packed and ready for the trip. She was waiting for Paul and a junior lawyer from their office who was accompanying them to the conference. "I'll be home Sunday afternoon," she said, coming up to me after dropping her bag at the door. I sat at the kitchen table, my back to her, nursing my coffee. Wrapping her arms around me, she leaned down, her lips brushing my ear. "I hope you feel better so we can start taking care of the baby," she whispered, her voice heavy with meaning. The scent of her hair brought me back to more innocent times, and for a moment, I wanted to cry. I fought back the emotion, determined to keep my composure. "I'll apply to help it heal," I assured her, stroking her hand and kissing her forehead gently. She sighed. "I wish I didn't have to go. It would be so much better to just stay home with you and be naked all weekend." "Why don't you just tell Evans that something more important has come up?" I suggested, the words slipping out before I could filter them. The way she looked at me told me she caught the underlying tension in my voice. "What's your problem with Paul?" she asked, her eyes wide with confusion. "First, you were rude at the party, and now you're talking like you hate this guy." I took a deep breath and forced myself to relax. Honestly, I've seen too many hot-headed jerks like Evans. He thinks he's untouchable, the epitome of power. They're big fish in a small pond, selling the illusion of influence and forcing people to buy into it. Like that mayor in South Carolina last year, a big shot who embezzled city funds while sleeping with 3 married women. Now he's serving 10 years in federal prison, and all those women are divorced and publicly humiliated. I paused, my voice lowering. I get the same vibe from Evans. If he makes it to Washington, within a week, he'll be seducing clueless interns. But trust me, eventually, the wheels will fall off that car, and when it does, I wouldn't want to be anywhere near him. Kelly stared at me in shock. She had heard me rant about types like Evans before, but she had never heard me link him to anything so sinister. Maybe I should have kept my mouth shut, but it felt good to vent. Even though our marriage was crumbling, I felt a responsibility to warn her. I still loved her, even if trust was forever out of reach. "That's terrible, what you said about Paul," Kelly protested, her tone defensive. "He's a good person who has done a lot for the people in this district. He's not like that." I could hear the pleading in her voice, desperate to defend him. Just then, we heard the unmistakable sound of a car horn outside the house, a disruption to our charged conversation. The moment hung in the air, thick with tension, as we both turned toward the window, uncertainty lingering between us. As Paul arrived, Kelly let out a frustrated sigh, her expression shifting to a mix of regret and fear. "I'll be home in 4 days," she said, her tone softening. "We can talk about everything then. But get ready, love. We have a child to think about." She wrapped her arms around me, pulling me close, and kissed me passionately. I melted into her embrace, responding with equal fervor. "Have a great week," she whispered, pulling back slightly, her eyes locked on mine. "I love you." "I love you too," I replied, my heart heavy yet hopeful. She grabbed her bag, opened the front door, and called over her shoulder, "Bye, dear." "Goodbye, Kelly," I said as I closed the door behind her. 30 minutes later, I boarded a train to the city. Barbara and I had a meeting scheduled with the FBI. To my relief, it turned out I didn't need to prepare any evidence. I would simply provide my insights on Paul Evans's embezzlement tactics. I'd rate his skills as moderately clever at best. We met at Barbara's off-campus apartment to review the documents she had retrieved from Paul's computer. The methods were pretty standard, but as I sifted through the papers, I estimated he had about $2 million stashed away in an offshore account. At least, that was the amount he had transferred, but I couldn't confirm if it was still there since those records were missing. Much of this money came from various small donors who wouldn't raise any eyebrows with the IRS, but I found myself wondering why people from out of state were donating to the DA's campaign. As I traced some of these donations, I uncovered a troubling pattern. Many came from defendants whose cases had been dismissed or settled with unusually lenient plea agreements. Then Barbara made the most shocking discovery. She found out that Paul wasn't just a shady prosecutor, he was also a father to 3 children, not just one. One child was born 3 years before his wife's death, and the mother was one of his employees at the time. The third child, born just 8 months after his wife passed, was from an 18-year-old volunteer at the hospital where his wife had been treated. Paul had been funneling $2,000 a month to both women under the guise of campaign contributions. Barbara was furious. I'd never seen her so angry, her fiery red hair seeming to spark with her indignation. "This is unbelievable," she exclaimed, nearly wrecking her apartment in her rage. By the time Kelly and Paul left, we had scrutinized everything in Paul's notes. Questions lingered, but we didn't have the resources to delve deeper. I meticulously documented all my findings and arranged a meeting with the senior FBI agent I worked with in the Philadelphia office. Barbara joined me, ready to spin the story we had crafted. After taking a forensic accounting course, Barbara had become curious about her father's notes and decided to investigate. When she stumbled upon some questionable entries, she reached out to me, knowing my background through Kelly. Gary, the seasoned FBI agent, listened intently. He could sense there was more beneath the surface, but we had dropped a gift-wrapped present in his lap, so he didn't press too hard. A corrupt prosecutor right in his backyard, especially one who had just launched a campaign for the U.S. Senate, this was a career-making opportunity, almost too good to be true. Afterward, we caught a taxi back to Barbara's apartment since she had a late class. I walked to the 30th Street station to catch the train home, my mind racing with thoughts of packing my things and leaving when Kelly returned. Gary had promised to expedite the case, ensuring Evans's documents would be subpoenaed by Wednesday. I knew it was only a matter of time before news of the investigation would leak. Paul was in for a rude awakening. The man who wielded so much power would find himself abandoned when the rats started leaving his sinking ship. As I settled into my seat on the train, Kelly called. "I called early because we're having a big dinner, and it'll be late before I get back to my room," she explained. I had no doubt that she didn't plan to spend the night alone. I made some vague remarks, assuring her everything was fine. But she picked up on my distracted tone, asking, "What's wrong?" "I just had a meeting with some FBI agents about something," I replied, carefully choosing my words. "I'm on the train, and the investigation is still ongoing, so I can't talk about it." "That sounds serious," she said, her voice tinged with worry. "Is it really getting to you?" "Yes," I admitted, "this case could blow up. It might make national news when the full story leaks." I hung up, my mind churning with the implications of our situation. I couldn't shake the feeling that the storm was just beginning, and I had to brace myself for the fallout. As I leaned against the fence, a flicker of intrigue crossed my mind. "Can you give me a little hint?" I asked Kelly, unable to resist the allure of the secrets I had gathered over the years. She leaned in closer, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Corrupt politicians, bribes, money laundering, sex scandals, adultery, kids. Any of my friends involved?" I felt the darkness creep in as I responded, "I've already said too much. If I reveal anything else, the Bureau will shut me down." "Oh, come on. You're no fun." Kelly pouted playfully. "Don't worry, love, your secret is safe with me." After we said our goodbyes, I switched off my thoughts, and the weight of my reality settled in. Walking into the house, I was struck by how surreal everything felt. My marriage was officially over. 10 years together, dating, marrying, building a life, and now I was facing the daunting prospect of being single again. It was as if the sun had set on my life, and I was just watching it disappear over the horizon. I sank into the couch, feeling the hours stretch into an endless void. It wasn't until late Saturday morning that I finally pulled myself out of my self-pity. I wouldn't say I didn't deserve some slack, but I knew it was time to shake things up. Ironically, I found myself mowing the lawn again when a sleek BMW convertible pulled into my driveway, catching my attention. I turned off the mower and watched as Barbara stepped out of the car. The first thing that struck me was her long, pale legs emerging from the driver's side. She wore sandals with thin cords that wrapped delicately around her calves, a look that always reminded me of the ancient Greeks. As she stepped out, her sculpted legs flexed with strength beneath her toned skin. In keeping with that Grecian vibe, she wore a pure white toga-like dress that ended mid-thigh, adorned with a strip of lace at the hem that allowed glimpses of her upper thighs. The light, silky fabric clung to her curves, and I noticed that it tended to be semi-sheer. Her bikini top peeked through, accentuating her perky breasts. Her arms were bare except for the light sprinkling of freckles dotting her upper arms and shoulders. The dress draped over one shoulder, leaving the other completely exposed, while long, red hair cascaded in waves over that same shoulder. But it was her striking gray-green eyes and radiant smile that truly captured my attention as she approached. I switched off the mower and greeted her, surprised by the warmth in my chest. "Well, you look better than I expected," Barbara said with a playful grin. "I half expected to find you in a bottle or perched on a ledge." I snorted, recalling my turbulent thoughts from the previous night. Let's just say I considered both options. "But we have to do this," I replied, a hint of determination in my voice. "Besides, it helps distract me. Have you met with a lawyer?" I shrugged, knowing I had taken that step earlier in the week. "I did that on Tuesday. The documents will be ready on Monday. I've agreed to audit a client in Austin and leave on Tuesday. Normally, I'd spend about 3 days on these business trips and then work remotely until I finish the report, but in this case, I'll be there for 3 weeks." I shrugged again, feeling a mix of cowardice and relief. I don't want to be here when all this mess starts brewing. I noticed a grin spread across Barbara's face, realizing she understood that this would draw attention to her as the daughter of that jerk. "Well, I'm glad you're thinking ahead," she said, her enthusiasm bubbling. "But I realize this is what you're good at." That familiar smile returned, igniting something inside me. "Okay, here's my plan," Barbara announced. "I'll help you finish your work here, and then you'll come to me. We'll have some fun, and you can even gawk at me in my swimsuit. You'll absolutely love it." I tried to perk up, but the weight of my situation loomed large. "Barbara, I'm still married," I protested. "I don't think I'm ready for anything for a while." "You need to let off some steam before you explode," Barbara insisted playfully. "Besides, you know the old saying, what's good for the goose is good for the gander." Her gaze was mischievous, a blend of playful and genuine, and I couldn't help but laugh. In one of those bizarre coincidences that prove truth is stranger than fiction, we ran into Olivia after finishing my yard work. I quickly cleaned up, and Barbara and I decided to grab a late lunch at a nice restaurant. I wasn't in the mood for revenge sex, but escaping the house felt liberating, especially with such a sweet girl like Barbara by my side. As we approached the restaurant, my heart sank slightly when I noticed Olivia's car parked outside. There she was, the very last person I expected to see at that moment. Would this be an awkward encounter, or could it turn into something unexpected? My mind raced with possibilities as I exchanged a glance with Barbara, and we stepped inside together. I nearly told Barbara to turn around so we could find another place, but instead, I did something completely out of character. It was a spur-of-the-moment decision, and after all my careful planning, something just snapped inside me when I saw Olivia's car parked in that lot. Without thinking twice, I casually hugged the red-haired beauty and led her into the restaurant, ready to embrace the unexpected. As we entered, I slipped a tip to the owner, discreetly arranging for a table that was slightly obscured but still visible when someone returned from the restroom. I sat Barbara down first, positioning her so she faced outward, and then I slid into the seat beside her. She smiled brightly when I took her hand, a warm gesture that sent a thrill through me. "Why the sudden change?" she asked, her smile sweet and inviting. I chuckled lightly. "Well, I didn't think I'd be having dinner with you tonight. You see, I just discovered that my wife has been unfaithful with my friend Olivia. Her car is parked right out front." Barbara burst into laughter, a throaty, contagious sound that drew glances from nearby tables. "So, I can play the role of the other woman? I think I can handle that." She leaned in and kissed me softly on the lips. It wasn't a deep, passionate kiss, but it was filled with promise, a hint of the connection that was blossoming between us. Our food arrived, and I found myself genuinely enjoying the evening, the worries of the day forgotten as we laughed and joked over our meal. Barbara's sense of humor was sharp, and I had never heard anyone make counting sound so scandalous. Then, as if the universe was playing a cruel joke, I glanced back and spotted Olivia walking past our table. I pointed her out to Barbara, who gasped in delight. "Oh my God! I was looking forward to this." Just then, Olivia's voice cut through the restaurant, sharp and furious. "Hogan! What the hell are you doing?" she shouted, her eyes darting between me and Barbara. "Who is this woman you're running around with while your wife is out of town? I expected better from you." The shock of her accusation made me release Barbara's hand and turn to Olivia. "What's your problem, Liv? It's just a little carefree fun before Kelly and I settle down and have a baby. Can you keep it down? People are trying to eat here." Olivia looked at me as if I'd just slapped her with a wet fish. "What did you just say?" I pressed on, my tone laced with sarcasm. "Come on, Liv. Kelly does the same. I'm sure she's having a blast with her boss right now, and for the past several months. So, I figured it was only fair for me to seduce the boss's daughter." Barbara stifled a giggle beside me, and I gave her a gentle squeeze to keep her quiet. Olivia's expression was a mix of disbelief and outrage. "You know about Kelly?" she stammered. "Of course I do. I must be the faithful, clueless husband while my wife is out there gallivanting with my so-called friend." The contempt dripped from my voice. Olivia flinched, her face pale. "You don't really think?" I cut her off. "I know Kelly wanted to try something else, one last fling before having a baby. If that's normal for her, what's it to you?" Olivia seemed taken aback. "I didn't know about this," she sighed, her facade cracking. "Well, thanks for the confirmation," I shot back. The look on Olivia's face twisted into something dark, and with a huff, she turned and stormed away from our table. A few minutes later, we heard the unmistakable sound of the restaurant door swinging shut behind her. "That was fun while it lasted," Barbara remarked with a light laugh, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "I really wanted her to stay a bit longer." Her smile made me blush. "You know she's probably on the phone with your wife right now," she added, raising an eyebrow playfully. "Yeah, I'd give it 5 minutes before my phone starts buzzing," I agreed. "But honestly, if she left now, it's still a 5-hour drive home from Pittsburgh. That gives us time for dessert and enough time for me to pack my things." Barbara's expression turned teasing. "It's a shame I won't get to see you in that bikini you promised," I said, regret lacing my tone. With a laugh, she leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Well, I guess we can always plan for another time. My semester ends in a week and a half." The thrill of the moment hung in the air, charged with possibilities, as we settled back into our dinner, the laughter and banter making me forget about everything else for just a little while. I had always wanted to see Austin. That thought barely registered as Kelly's tongue slipped into my ear, but it quickly faded when I remembered Olivia's kiss. After Olivia left the restaurant, Kelly began bombarding me with calls just 10 minutes later. Her messages were filled with fury, and I almost found it amusing. She railed against my supposed betrayal, each voice message dripping with anger. After listening for nearly an hour, I finally blocked her number. I knew she would find a way to reach me again, but since she was driving back from Pittsburgh, borrowing someone's phone was unlikely. Once I got home, the reality of my situation hit me hard. I began packing all my personal belongings, not just the essentials for my trip to Austin. I had hours of packing ahead of me, knowing I might be leaving my home for the last time. After booking a hotel room near Philadelphia Airport, I stored most of my things until I found a new place to stay. I stayed in touch with Barbara on the phone. She was out for a walk with a friend while her father left her furious messages. I could only imagine the chaos unfolding back home. I decided to move my flight to Austin up by a day, so I left early Monday morning. Kelly, undeterred, called me several times from different numbers, her voice now a tearful rant. She pleaded with me to explain how I could do this to her and lamented how I had ruined her career at Siri. It was clear that Olivia's outburst had turned heads. Someone had even posted a detailed account of the incident on their blog, linking Barbara and me to the fallout. My comment about Kelly having fun with Paul, along with news of their weekend together in Pittsburgh, caused quite a stir in the political circles of the county and at the courthouse. For the rest of the week, I kept my distance from the news coming out of Philadelphia. It wasn't until Friday that I received a letter detailing the chaos in Doylestown. To my surprise, it was from Margaret, a senior manager in the DA's office. The seasoned lawyer expressed her apologies for everything that had transpired. She knew Paul had been involved with 2 women outside of work but was completely unaware of Kelly's connection. Margaret praised me for using the law against the lawyer, and I could sense her genuine support. The week had been tumultuous in the DA's office, Margaret explained. Paul had come in on Monday morning, trying to mitigate the damage and denying any inappropriate behavior. "This is just my daughter's rebellion under the influence of her cheating husband," he claimed, desperately spinning a narrative. On Tuesday, the tides turned dramatically for Kelly. She was served divorce papers, citing adultery as the grounds. The envelope contained photographs, DVDs, and a letter from me. When she read my words, her scream of horror echoed through the office, prompting Margaret and 2 other colleagues to rush in. I could only imagine the scene: Kelly, collapsing into a chair, shock written all over her face as the incriminating photographs scattered across the table. In my letter, I made it clear that I was not having an affair but hoped she now understood how I felt about her and this jerk. I told her I couldn't remain married to someone I couldn't trust, especially after discovering her infidelity. The following day, the office was unusually quiet. Margaret was in a meeting with Paul when 4 men in suits stormed in, catching everyone off guard. Paul erupted in anger, demanding to know why they had interrupted. But when one of the men informed him he was under arrest, I could only imagine the disbelief on his face as they slapped handcuffs on him and escorted him out. The reporters outside the courthouse had been tipped off somehow, and the scene quickly turned chaotic. I couldn't help but think that I owed Gary a few beers for this unexpected turn of events. At the end of her letter, Margaret expressed her regret for the way things had unfolded in her office. She also offered her support, saying I should let her know if I needed anything. I appreciated her gesture. It was clear her letter was partly about damage control, but mostly, I sensed she was genuinely a moral and professional person in a sea of chaos. I always thought Kelly was the one for me, but all my plans for a quiet divorce went up in smoke because of my impulsive prank with Olivia at that restaurant. Before I knew it, Philadelphia news stations were all over Paul's arrest and the charges against him. I told Kelly this whole situation had all the ingredients of a summer romance: sex, betrayal, revenge, and a whole lot of anger. The media loved it, and soon, hungry 24-hour news outlets had picked it up like it was the hottest story of the year. Fortunately, I managed to dodge the worst of the coverage since I was out of town. I had booked a second hotel room 10 miles away from the one on my work itinerary, which made it tough for the reporters to track me down. Still, they camped out at my original hotel, waiting for a chance to catch me. I saw them on TV, broadcasting live from outside my house, where Kelly didn't dare show her face. All they filmed were my relatives coming and going, and it wasn't long before they turned their cameras on Barbara. She took the brunt of the media storm, being the daughter who had betrayed her father. With classes and exams looming, Barbara had a tough time. At first, the reporters found her easily, but the school eventually kicked them off campus because they were disrupting the students. Then, 2 women who had children with Paul came forward, eager to get their 15 minutes of fame, which only fueled the frenzy. After a few days of chaos, Barbara managed to slip away from campus and head to the airport, much to the disappointment of the media, who were expecting her to appear at her graduation ceremony. In the end, she didn't show up, and the story slowly faded from the headlines. It reignited when Paul's trial began, but he pleaded guilty to multiple charges, ending up as a guest of the federal government for the next 20 years. Fortunately, his guilty plea meant Barbara and I wouldn't be called to testify, and the case slipped off the media's radar, taking all of us with it. Oddly enough, after all the publicity, my divorce went through smoothly and with minimal fuss. Just 4 days after receiving the papers, Kelly signed them without hesitation. I later received a letter from her apologizing for what she had done to me and to us. Furious after returning from Pittsburgh, she swore she would never forgive me for betraying her. But realizing she was the only one who had cheated made her see the hypocrisy in her anger. In the end, she accepted my offer for a 50-50 split and simply asked that, when things calmed down, we could meet so she could apologize in person. She concluded the letter with a heartfelt note that she would always love me and wished me well. Later, I learned from her mother that she had quit her job and moved to the Midwest to live with her aunt. Ironically, finding out about Paul ended up being a career boost for me. The FBI gave me full credit for analyzing the tapes related to his case. Since I was hiding from the media, I dove deeper into my work in Austin, not only uncovering the embezzler they were after but also discovering a second one they had no intel on at the time. My firm promoted me, putting me in charge of the white-collar crime team. Some joker even dubbed us the heroes, a title I could only chuckle at. The best part came when they assigned me an assistant, a recent college graduate eager to gain experience in forensic accounting. I had never enjoyed working late as much as I did then, especially with her bright energy lighting up the office. But the real perk was when I returned to my hotel room after long days of work. The sight of her bikini hanging off the edge of my bed was a welcome distraction, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling around us. It was a strange time, filled with unexpected twists and new beginnings, but I was ready to embrace it all, one day at a time.